All right, talking Oregon football with a big matchup against Utah coming up this Saturday night. The Utes, a team that's dropped a couple non-conference games against BYU and San Diego State. They've generally taken care of business, although they ran into a second-half buzzsaw at Oregon State, a team that you're going to see next week, of course, in the annual rivalry game. But your thoughts about Utah in this matchup as Oregon comes in as a three-point dog in a very difficult place to play?
A little surprised by the fact that they're an underdog. I don't know what your perspective on that is, but I expected they might be favored. Underdog as a visiting team suggests, especially at 3 points, that this is about an even match teams, and I would maybe take some issue with that based upon the way I think Oregon is performing right now. Again, I understand if you're just scoreboard watching, you feel that way. You don't think Oregon's playing at that high of a level. I think they are playing better than a lot of people want to give them credit for. And if you look at just baseline stats in the conference and nationally, they're up there. You know, they're a top 50 offensive team, top 50 defensive team, top 30, top 20 in a lot of categories. They're, I think, 11th in the country in rushing offense. This is a team that can play with anybody. I really think that. And this Utah task is going to be interesting because I wrote a story on ducktartar.com that you can go check out if you want, but just about the similarities between these two teams. You know, Oregon players saying, kind of feel like we're looking in the mirror. I made the reference. It's kind of like that Spider-Man meme where they're pointing at each other and it's the two of them looking at each other. Because these are two teams that want to win in similar fashion, Mark. I mean, Oregon wants to run the ball. Utah wants to run the ball. Oregon's defense wants to shut down the run. Utah's defense wants to shut down the run. Like there's strength on strength on strength, basically across the board this weekend. I just think Oregon's probably stronger in almost all of those instances. I think Oregon has the better offensive line. I think Oregon has the more explosive player in Kayvon Thibodeau. Not to take anything away from Devin Lloyd or Mika Tafua, who are both really good players. I mean, Lloyd is probably going to be, and deservedly based upon statistics, the Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year. I mean, his numbers this year are incredibly impressive. 20 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. I think he has 84 tackles. Thibodeau does not have the stats to match that, partly because he missed about 3.5 games with injury or suspension from a targeting call. But I just still think Oregon is the class of this conference. And I haven't seen anything from Utah that really leads me to believe that Oregon is a 3-point underdog on the road here, or that they're even. I would say Oregon should be 2 to 4 point favorites on a neutral site at least, and we'll see what that plays. I guess we'll see how that plays out for the conference championship game down in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks. If what the line looks like there, because these teams should still meet for a second time in a couple of weeks, which kind of makes this whole thing funny to a certain degree. But I'm surprised at that. I don't know if those listening are, or if they think Utah should be favored, but the number 3 team in the country is going on the road to the number 23 third ranked team as an underdog. While you have, and I know I'm not taking anything away from Ohio State, but Ohio State's like a 20-point home favorite against the 7th team in the country. How Oregon is perceived is I think very, very confusing to me at a certain degree. Again, I understand some of the doubts about Oregon, but to not be a more substantial favorite or to be a favorite at all in this one is I think a little perplexing.
We've gotten to the point in the season where if we have a conference matchup, of course, we can make a number of comparisons against common opponents, and we see that across the board with Utah and with Oregon. I've seen Oregon play, as I typically do most of the major teams across the country, 5 or 6 times. I haven't seen as much Utah football as I typically would at this point, so I don't have a beat on how they've played other than looking at box scores and game recaps for the most part and seeing highlights and checking in for a drive here or there. Interesting that they've taken a couple players from the Big 12 to build their offensive skill position players, at least with Cameron Rising from Oklahoma or from Texas, TJ Pledger from Oklahoma, who obviously are coming off nice games against Arizona, even though the Utes had that game a little bit closer than you might expect.
Yeah, no, and Tavion Thomas, the running back who missed the game against Arizona, Cincinnati transfer, he's played really well this year, especially the last couple of weeks. I think he had 8 combined touchdowns in 2 straight games going into Arizona. Missed that game with an injury. I'm told he'll play or expected to play this weekend. The Utes have some guys, and I think offensively and defensively, this is a team that will be well represented from a Pac-12, like all conference honors perspective. Don't want to take anything away from that. I will be very curious to see how Utah on offense is able to move the ball, because I do think, again, they want to run the football. And this Oregon defense the last 2 weeks has held opposing offenses below like 110 yards both games. Only a couple teams this year have had much success at all. One team over 200 yards, and that was against Arizona, where Oregon was down literally 6 of its top edge players. I mean, they were playing walk-ons essentially for most of that game. I think there is a recipe here where Oregon can win semi-decisively, but that's going to come down to if the defense. I really think it comes down to the trenches just in general. Like, can Oregon run the ball effectively? I think they can. Can Oregon stop Utah from running the ball effectively? I think they can. And by decisive, I'm not saying 3 scores. I'm saying 10 to 14 points, because that's decisive for Oregon this year based upon previous results on the field.
And Cameron Rising coming in with a nice 14-2 touchdown to pick ratio, taking care of the football. Utah with some early struggles, as we noted, but shaping into the best team in the division, certainly, and a typical Kyle Whittingham type of unit that's hard-nosed up front on defense and will run the ball first and foremost. Eric Scopel on the line, breaking down Oregon football. We'll probably have the question for you, Eric, in 2 weeks about whether it's truly difficult to beat the same team twice in one season. We shall see. Any other thoughts on the game before we let you go?
If Oregon could turn over, you mentioned the passing stats there with Rising. He hasn't thrown an interception in like 4.5 games. He threw 2 against Arizona State, and those are the only 2 of the whole season. He's been really good at protecting the football. I think if Oregon can force a couple turnovers there, that'll be crucial too. Just because Rising has proven to be, it's a weird year in the conference. I was doing this exercise in my head a couple days ago. Who is the first and second team all Pac-12 quarterbacks? I really don't know. It's like 7 or 8 guys are kind of all muddled there together. But Rising, the way he's played, and if he has a big game on Saturday, I could see himself kind of cementing himself in that first or second team slot. He's been that good. For Oregon to win, they will need to make his life a little difficult. Fortunately, they have a guy named Kayvon Thibodeau who's pretty good at doing that.
Check out Eric's work at 247 Sports. It's duckterritory.com, breaking down Oregon football, and, of course, a huge one coming up on the road against Utah. Eric, we appreciate you stopping by.
Anytime, man. Let me know.